Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Om Jnana Dharmandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Dear Krishna Doska Mayamurti Namine Namasaya Prabhupada Priyate Sudri Dasudi Nastyamyam Tasha Bhakti Vadine Namo Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Vishesha Sunyavani Paschatati Satanine. So last week for our Chaitanya Charitamrita reading, we were reading about what are the best of all the branches of the Chaitanya tree. Thanks. And just to recap, we didn't get through the whole of text 84 because it's quite a long purport explaining the lineage and quite a lot of detail about the best of all devotees of the branches of the Chaitanya tree, Sri Sanatan, Sri Rupa, and Anupama, the three brothers who we know as Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, and Anupama. And we are known as Rupanugas, so we're following in the footsteps of Rupa Goswami. So the more we hear about Rupa Goswami, and of course Sanatana Goswami, who are very prolific authors of so many Vaishnava literatures, the more we hear about them, the more we can get to know them, and we can actually pray to the Goswamis to understand a little bit about Vrindavan as the bhajan goes, and also about the affairs of Radha and Krishna. So we left off with talking a little bit about just sort of the genealogical table, the family tree, and I'm just going to start at Adi Leela chapter 10, 84. And where he left off was the line, actually it is to be understood. Actually, it is to be understood from the statement of Sanatana Goswami that Sri Rupa Goswami and Vallabha went to Vrindavan under the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. First, they went to Mathura, where they met a gentleman named Subudhi Roy, who maintained himself by selling dry fuel wood. He was very pleased to meet Sri Rupa Goswami and Anupama, and he showed them the 12 forests of Vrindavan. Thus they lived in Vrindavan for 1 month, and then again went to search for Sanatana Goswami. Following the course of the Ganges, they reached Allahabad, or Prayag Tirtha, but because Sanatana Goswami had come there by a different road, they did not meet him there. And when Sanatana Goswami came to Mathura, he was informed of the visit of Rupa Goswami and Anupama by Subudhi Roy. When Rupa Goswami and Anupama met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Benares, they heard about Sanatana Goswami's travels from him, and thus they returned to Bengal, adjusted their affairs with the state, and on the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, went to see the Lord at Jagannath Puri. In the year 1436 Sakabda, which is AD 1514, the youngest brother, Anupama, died and went back home, back to Godhead. He went to the abode in the spiritual sky where Sri Ramachandra is situated. At Jagannath Puri, Sri Rupa Goswami informed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of this incident. Vallabha was a great devotee of Sri Ramachandra. Therefore, he could not seriously consider the worship of Radha Govinda according to the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's also talked about elsewhere, that he was so attached to Lord Ramachandra that he just couldn't get his mind around the worship of Radha and Krishna, because he just was fixed on his Istadev, Sri Ramachandra. Yet he directly accepted Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ramachandra. In the Bhakti Ratnakara, there is the following statement. Vallabha was given the name Anupama by Sri Gaurasundara, but he was always absorbed in the devotional service of Lord Ramachandra. He did not know anyone but Sri Ramachandra, but he knew that Chaitanya Goswami was the same Lord Ramachandra. So, of course, he was attached to Lord Chaitanya as well in that way. In the Gaura Ganadesh Deepika, Sri Rupa Goswami is described to be the gopi named Sri Rupa Manjari. In the Bhakti Ratnakara, there is a list of the books Sri Rupa Goswami compiled. Of all his books, the following 16 are very popular among Vaishnavas. Hamsaduta, Udara Sandesh, Krishna Janma Titi Vidi, Radha Krishna Ganodesh Deepika, Brihat and Lagu, Stavamala, Vigdagda Madhava, Lalita Madhava, Dana Kali Kaumudi, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is the most celebrated book of Sri Rupa Goswami, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Ujjvala Nilamani, Akyata Chandrika, Mathura Mahima, Padyavali, Nataka Chandrika, and Lagu Bhagavatam Rita. We actually have a lot of these books that have been translated that we can either hear on audio. I know His Holiness Sri Krishna Goswami has very nice audio books on the Vigdagda Madhava and the Lita Madhava, and the Stavamala, and of course the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and the Lagu Bhagavatamrita. Those are all books that we have available that we can read of Sri Rupa Goswami's as well, published by the BBT. Sri Rupa Goswami gave up all family connections, joined the renounced order of life, and divided his money, giving 50% to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas and 25% to his Kadumba, family members, and keeping 25% for personal emergencies. I think we were talking about, I don't know if we talked about it in depth, but when Sri Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami were employed by the Muslim government, they were making a lot of money. I mean, they were extremely wealthy employees, and also very trusted employees of the Muslim government at the time. And so when he they began to become more and more attached to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and decided to give up those appointments in the Muslim government, he had quite a lot of money amassed. So, of course, if you're, becoming sort of a mendicant to just chant Hare Krishna and execute Bhakti Yoga, then you have no need for those things. So he gave all those things away. He met Haridas Thakur in Jagannath Puri, where he also met Lord Chaitanya and his other associates. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to praise the handwriting of Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami could compose verses according to the desires of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and by his direction, he wrote 2 books named Lalita Madhava and Vigdagda Madhava. Lord Chaitanya desired the 2 brothers, Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, to publish many books in support of the Vaishnava religion. When Sanatana Goswami met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord advised him also to go to Vrindavan. They were born in on a high-class family, but then at some point in time they took these appointments with the Muslim sort of government, and then they weren't active in as Brahmanas or Vaishnavas at the time. So when they finally came back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, their great talents were brought forth, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desired that they share all those treasures with everyone by writing. Sri Sanatana Goswami is described in the Gaura Ganodesh Deepika. He was formerly known as Rati Manjari or sometimes Lavanga Manjari. In the Bhakti Ratnakara, it is stated that his spiritual master, Vidya Vachaspati, sometimes stayed in the village of Ramakeli, and Sanatana Goswami studied all the Vedic literatures from him. He was so devoted to his spiritual master that this cannot be described. According to the Vedic system, if someone sees a Muslim, he must perform rituals to atone for the meeting. Sanatana Goswami always associated with Muslim kings. Not giving much attention to the Vedic injunctions, he used to visit the houses of Muslim kings, and thus he considered himself to have been converted into a Muslim. He was therefore always very humble and meek. He, of course, thought he was extremely fallen because he had taken the association of Muslim kings, and he left the association of Vaishnavas. When Sanatana Goswami presented himself before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, "I am always in association with lower class people, and my behavior is therefore very abominable." He actually belonged to a respectable Brahmana family, but because he considered his behavior to be abominable, he did not try to place himself among the Brahmanas, but always remained among people of the lower castes. When he finally reached, they don't talk about this here, but when he finally reached Lord Chaitanya after traveling for such a long way, he was not really recognizable because he, had a beard, and he just was really humble, and he wasn't really taking very much care of himself because he just thought himself, very low. He wrote the Hari Bhakti Vilas and Vaishnava Toshini, which is a commentary on the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the year 1476 Sakabda, he completed the Brihad Vaishnava Toshini commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. In the year 1504 Sakabda, he finished the Laghu Toshini. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught his principles through 4 chief followers. Among them, Ramananda Roy is exceptional, for through him the Lord taught how a devotee can completely vanquish the power of Cupid. By Cupid's power, as soon as one sees a beautiful woman, he is conquered by her beauty. Sri Ramananda Roy, however, vanquished Cupid's pride. Indeed, while rehearsing the Jagannath Vallabha Natika, he personally directed extremely beautiful young girls in dancing, but he was never affected by their youthful beauty. Sri Ramananda Roy personally bathed these girls, touching them and washing them with his own hands, yet he remained calm and passionless, as a great devotee should be. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu certified that this was possible only for Ramananda Roy, and I guess maybe we all know or can assume by the writings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that Ramananda Roy was an expansion of Vishaka. So that's why he was able to, remain calm and passionless, because it was Vishaka Devi that was, for Jagannath's pleasure, grooming these girls and teaching them to dance nicely for Jagannath as Devadasis and making sure they looked very beautiful for them. So he was able to play his sort of main Manjari role, or his main gopi role, to have these manjaris sort of able to dance nicely for Jagannath and perform nicely for Jagannath. So he had the greatest control, very, very dhira in that respect. He had the greatest control over his senses, and that was an exceptional, and still is very exceptional, because as we all know, in this material world, is that sex makes the world go round. So for somebody to have that level of control on their senses and to be able to exhibit that is extremely rare and a very exalted quality. Similarly, Damodar Pandit was notable for his objectivity as a critic. He did not even spare Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from his criticism. This also cannot be imitated by anyone else. Haridas Thakur is exceptional for his forbearance because although he was beaten with canes in 22 marketplaces, he was nevertheless tolerant. Similarly, Sri Sanatana Goswami, although he belonged to a most respectful Brahmana family, was exceptional for his humility and meekness. So this is I felt like this was a really interesting paragraph that he was teaching. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching his principles through these 4 followers who exhibited the topmost, soberness, calmness, and passion, lack of, passionate nature with Ramananda Roy. And Damodar Pandit was, very objective, very fair, and wasn't able to be pulled one way or another, wasn't swayed in his belief. And Haridas Thakur, who also was from presumably a low-born family in that pastime, and he was beaten and put down so many times, and told he couldn't chant the Maha Mantra, told he should be converted to a Muslim, should convert himself to a Muslim, and he still remained extremely tolerant with all these trials and tribulations throughout his life. He just went on chanting Hare Krishna and had faith in the Lord. And then Sanatana Goswami was just very humble. He just always exhibited the most humility. And there's many instances that we'll read about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita going forward of him exhibiting those such a humble demeanor, just not really willing to put himself forth as any sort of scholar, even though he had wrote so many wonderful Vaishnava commentaries and scriptures. In the Madhya Lila, chapter 19, the device adopted by Sanatana Goswami to get free from the government service is described. He served a notice of sickness to the Nawab, the Muslim governor, but actually he was studying Srimad Bhagavatam with Brahmanas at home, which I thought was funny, because if you call out sick, in today's day and age, people call out sick because they want to, go out, they want to hang out, or they want to do something. They're not studying the Srimad Bhagavatam at home all day if they're playing hooky from work, So Sanatana Goswami, however, is obviously not an ordinary individual. The Nawab received information of this through a royal physician, and he immediately went to see Sanatana Goswami to discover his intentions. The Nawab requested Sanatana to accompany him on an expedition to Orissa, but when Sanatana Goswami refused, the Nawab ordered that he be imprisoned, because Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami were actually sort of confidants even they were like really entrenched in the Muslim government. They were like agents of the Muslim government, so they, had many confidant, everybody was confiding in them, they trusted him implicitly, and for him to just all of a sudden sort of quit working and start reading the Srimad Bhagavatam was very disturbing. So he decided to imprison him because, at that point, maybe it was understood that he wasn't, sort of a de facto Muslim. When Rupa Goswami left home, he wrote a note for Sanatana Goswami informing him of some money that he had entrusted to a local grocer. Sanatana Goswami took advantage of this money to bribe the jailkeeper and get free from detention. Then he left for Benares to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, bringing with him only one servant, whose name was Ishana. On the way, they stopped at a sarai, or hotel, and when the hotel keeper found out that Ishana had some gold coins with him, he planned to kill both Sanatana Goswami and Ishana to take away the coins. Later, Sanatana Goswami saw that although the hotel keeper did not know them, he was being especially attentive to their comfort. Therefore, he concluded that Ishana was secretly carrying some money and that the hotel keeper was aware of this and therefore planned to kill them for it. Upon being questioned by Sanatana Goswami, Ishana admitted that he indeed had money with him, and immediately Sanatana Goswami took the money and gave it to the hotel keeper, requesting him to help them get through the jungle. It said that he had 8 gold coins, and Ishana told Sanatana Goswami that he had only had 7 gold coins, so he still sort of held one back in case, of an emergency. Thus, with the help of the hotel keeper, who was also the chief of the thieves of that territory, Sanatana Goswami crossed over the Hazipur mountains, which are presently known as the Hazira Bags. I couldn't find that online, actually. He then met his brother-in-law Srikanta, who requested that he stay with him. Sanatana Goswami refused, but before they parted, Srikanta gave him a valuable blanket. Somehow or other, Sanatana Goswami reached Varanasi and met Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the house of Chandrasekhar. By the order of the Lord, Sanatana Goswami was cleanly shaved and his dress changed to that of a mendicant or Babaji. When he actually showed up at the door of Chandrasekhar, Chandrasekhar looked out. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "There's a great devotee at the door. Go answer the door." He hadn't even knocked, and then Chandrasekhar went and looked, and it would just look like some Muslim, homeless person basically, and he didn't really think that he was anybody. So he closed the door again, and then finally Lord Chaitanya went to receive him. He put on old garments of tapan mishras and took prasadam at the home of a Maharashtrian Brahmana. Then, in discourses with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord himself explained everything about devotional service to Sanatana Goswami. He advised Sanatana Goswami to write books on devotional service, including a book of directions for Vaishnava activities, and to excavate the lost places of pilgrimage in Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him his blessings to do all this work, and also explained to Sanatana Goswami the import of the Atmarama verse from 61 different angles of vision. Sanatana Goswami went to Vrindavan by the main road, and when he reached Mathura, he met Saburi Roy. Then he returned to Jagannath Puri through Jharikanda, the Madhya Pradesh jungle. At Jagannath Puri, he decided to give up his body by falling down beneath a wheel of the Jagannath Rath, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saved him. Of course, he knew what he was thinking, so then he called him out and said, "What are you doing? Why are you thinking you're going to kill yourself under the wheel of Jagannath?" Then Sanatana Goswami met Haridas Thakur and heard about the disappearance of Anupama. Sanatana Goswami later described the glories of Haridas Thakur. Sanatana observed the etiquette of Jagannath's temple by going along the beach to visit Lord Chaitanya, although it was extremely hot due to the sun. The sand was so hot that his feet, as he was walking along the beach, was getting burned, but he didn't think he was worthy enough to go through the main road. So he took the roundabout way because of his humility. He requested Jagannananda Pandit to give him permission to return to Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu praised the character of Sanatana Goswami, and he embraced Sanatana, accepting his body as spiritual. Sanatana Goswami was ordered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to live at Jagannath Puri for 1 year. When he returned to Vrindavan after that time, he again met Rupa Goswami, and both brothers remained in Vrindavan to execute the orders of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The place where Sri Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami formerly lived has now become a place of pilgrimage. It is generally known as Gupta Vrindavan or Hidden Vrindavan, and it is situated about 8 miles south of English Bazaar. There the following places are still visited: the temple of the Sri Madana Mohan deity, the Kali Kadamba tree, under which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Sanatana Goswami at night, and the Rupa Sagara, a large pond excavated by Sri Rupa Goswami. A society named Ramakeli Samskara Samiti was established in 1924 to repair the temple and renovate the pond. So, just in the description, the overall description of Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Sanatana Goswami, we can understand that they were like the right and left arms of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu really didn't write anything while he was on the planet, apart from the Shikshastika, he didn't actually leave any written, anything written. He implored Sri Sanatana and Sri Rupa Goswami, who were obviously extremely exalted devotees, he entrusted them with all these Vaishnava literatures so they could further his mission, and try to get this information out to as many of the fallen conditioned souls, obviously, as possible, since that's Lord Chaitanya's mission, is to help reclaim the fallen conditioned souls. So Sri Sanatana, Sri Rupa Goswami were very instrumental, and still are very instrumental in that mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So text 85. Tanra madhye rupa sanatana bharasaka nupama jiva rajendra di upashaka. Among these branches, Rupa and Sanatana were principal. Anupama, Jiva Goswami, and others, headed by Rajendra, were their sub-branches. And now we'll hear a little bit about Jiva Goswami, which is the nephew of Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatana Goswami. In the Gora Ganodesh Deepika, it is said that Srila Jiva Goswami was formerly Vilas Manjari Gopi. From his very childhood, Jiva Goswami was greatly fond of Srimad Bhagavatam. He later came to Navadvip to study Sanskrit, and following in the footsteps of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, he circumambulated the entire Navadvip Dham. After visiting Navadvip Dham, he went to Benares to study Sanskrit under Madhusudana Vachaspati, and after finishing his studies in Benares, he went to Vrindavan and took shelter of his uncle, Sri Rupa and Sanatana. This is described in the Bhakti Ratnakara. As far as our information goes, Srila Jiva Goswami composed and edited at least 25 books. They are all very much celebrated, and they are listed as follows. The Hari Namarita Rakarana, Sutra Malika, Dhatu Sangraha, Krishna Chara Dipika, Gopala Virudavali, Rasamrita Shesha, Sri Madhava Mahotsava, Sri Sankalpa Kapa Vriksha, Bhavartu Sukha Cha Champu, Gopala Tapani Tika, a commentary on the Brahma Samhita, a commentary on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, a commentary on the Ujjvala Nilamani, which are already things that had been written by his uncles, a commentary on the Yogashara Stava, a commentary on the Gayatri Mantra as described in the Agni Purana, a description of the Lord's lotus feet derived from the Padma Purana, a description of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, Gopala Champu in 2 parts, and the 7 Sandarbhas, Krama, Tattva, Bhagavat, Paramatma, Krishna, Bhakti, and Priti Sandarbha. Very prolific author. After the disappearance of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami in Vrindavan, Srila Jiva Goswami became the Acharya of all the Vaishnavas in Bengal, Orissa, and the rest of the world, and it is he who used to guide them in their devotional service. In Vrindavan, he established the Radha Damodar temple, where, after retirement, we had the opportunity to live from 1962 until 1965, when we decided to come to the United States of America. So that's where Srila Prabhupada had taken shelter for several years, which we just saw recently. And it's a very wonderful place, and it's so spiritually surcharged. When Jiva Goswami was still present, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami compiled his famous Chaitanya Charitamrita. Later, Srila Jiva Goswami inspired Srinivasacharya, Narottama Das Thakur, and Dukhi Krishnadas to preach Krishna consciousness in Bengal. Jiva Goswami was informed that all the manuscripts that had been collected from Vrindavan and sent to Bengal for preaching purposes were plundered near Vishnupura in Bengal, but later he received the information that the books had been recovered. So he pretty much sent out the first book distribution party, after writing all these manuscripts, and then he sent Narottama Das Thakur and Srinivasacharya out to distribute those books and to teach. Sri Jiva Goswami awarded the designation Kaviraj to Ramachandra Sena, a disciple of Srinivasacharya's, and to Ramachandra's younger brother, Govinda. While Jiva Goswami was alive, Srimati Janavadevi, the pleasure potency of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, went to Vrindavan with a few devotees. Jiva Goswami was very kind to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the Vaishnavas from Bengal. Whoever went to Vrindavan, he provided with a residence and prasadam. His disciple, Krishnadas Adhikari, listed all the books of the Goswamis in his diary. The Sahajiyas level 3 accusations against Srila Jiva Goswami. This is certainly not congenial for the execution of devotional service. The first accusation concerns a materialist who was very proud of his reputation as a great Sanskrit scholar and approached Sri Rupa and Sanatana to argue with them about the revealed scriptures. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, not wanting to waste their time, gave him a written statement that he had defeated them in a debate on the revealed scriptures. Taking this paper, the scholar approached Jiva Goswami for a similar certificate of defeat, but Jiva Goswami did not agree to give him one. On the contrary, he argued with him regarding the scriptures and defeated him. Certainly it was right for Jiva Goswami to stop such a dishonest scholar from advertising that he had defeated Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, but due to their illiteracy, the Sahajiya class referred to this incident to accuse Srila Jiva Goswami of deviating from the principle of humility. And actually, to that end, Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami sort of like banished Jiva Goswami for some period of time because they, were practicing obviously great humility, and since that was looked upon as not such a humble action, even though his very learned uncles had already sort of admitted defeat because they didn't care about this person. I mean, he wasn't really of any consequence to them, and he wasn't. It's just like a fly on the moon. It wasn't really anything anybody would notice. But they actually sent Jiva Goswami out of the vicinity, so he would kind of be out of sight and also learn a little humility, which he did. Which he did. I mean, he didn't have to, but he got the idea that he, in all instances, should be humble, and even if it's just something that is an appearance, then he doesn't have to. Even if you know that you were trying your best, then you should still make an appearance of being humble. Because that's what we have to do to remain humble. Kind of fake it till you make it. One should follow the example given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya says in his Siksastika, Trinadapi sunichena taroreva sahishnuna manina madadena kirtaniya sadaharihi. One can chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. And I think from Jiva Goswami's point of view, it just felt like he was trying to save the reputation of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sri Sanatana Goswami, but it really wasn't necessary. He should have just sort of let this guy go on his merry way. Yeah, well, he was bragging, right? And then... It didn't seem like though he was defeating them because he was wanting to, Okay, so yeah. Nevertheless, when Lord was informed that Nityananda Prabhu was injured by Jagai and Madai, he immediately went to the spot, angry like fire, wanting to kill them. Thus, Lord Chaitanya has explained his verse by the example of his own behavior. One should tolerate insults against oneself, but when there is blasphemy committed against superiors such as other Vaishnavas, one should be neither humble nor meek. One must take proper steps to counteract such blasphemy. This is the duty of a servant of a guru and Vaishnavas. Anyone who understands the principle of eternal servitude to the Guru and Vaishnavas will appreciate the action of Srila Jiva Goswami in connection with the so-called scholar's victory over his gurus. Srila Rupa and Srila Sanatana Goswami. So I guess his problem was he bragged about it. Another story fabricated to defame Srila Jiva Goswami states that when Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami showed him the newly completed manuscript of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Jiva Goswami thought it would hamper his reputation as a big scholar and therefore threw it into a well. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was greatly shocked according to this story, and he died immediately. Fortunately, a copy of the manuscript of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita had been kept by a person named Mukunda, and therefore later it was possible to publish the book. This story is another ignominious example of blasphemy against a guru and a Vaishnava. Such a story should never be accepted as authoritative. According to another accusation, Srila Jiva Goswami did not approve of the principles of the Parakya Ras of Brajadam, and therefore supported Swakya Ras, showing that Radha and Krishna are eternally married. Actually, when Jiva Goswami was alive, some of his followers disliked the Parakya Ras of the gopis. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami, for their spiritual benefit, supported Swakya Ras, for he could understand that Sahajiyas would otherwise exploit the Parakya Ras as they are actually doing at the present time. Unfortunately, in Vrindavan and Navadvip, it has become fashionable among Sahajiyas in their debauchery to find an unmarried sexual partner to live with to execute so-called devotional service and Parakya Ras. Foreseeing this, Srila Jiva Goswami supported Swakya Ras, and later all the Vaishnava Acharyas also approved of it. Srila Jiva Goswami was never opposed to the transcendental Parakya Ras, nor has any other Vaishnava disapproved of it. Srila Jiva Goswami strictly followed his predecessor gurus and Vaishnavas, Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, and Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami accepted him as one of his instructor gurus. So we can see when someone is a wonderful devotee of Krishna and they're executing devotional service and trying to teach and spread the glories of Krishna, that there'll always be some envious personalities who want to somehow defame them or, cause them to become, and, cause their reputation to become besmirched. And as Prabhupada said, that anyone who understands the principle of eternal servitude to the Guru and Vaishnavas will appreciate the action of Srila Jiva Goswami. And also of how that's, ignominious example of blasphemy against a Guru and a Vaishnava. That's pretty much ignorant, but also a little bit, ignominious is sort of ignorant, but a little bit spiteful, also a little bit spiteful. So that's Srila Jiva Goswami. He's one of also our main authoritative figures as far as someone who writes scriptures, and we follow as far as an example to the end of his pastimes and book distribution and writing scriptures, following his authority, following his gurus, Srila Rupa and Sri Sanatana Goswami. And very interesting point about how he supported the Swakya Bhav, because that will hopefully create more of a peaceful, for some of the followers, a more peaceful point about the relationship of Sri Radha and Krishna. So it's doesn't seem so, unusual, especially as we all know, and I just said before, is that sex desire makes the world go round, and seems like sex desire with between unmarried people are probably even a little bit more, desirable in this material world than between marrieds, at least hearing about it for many. So anyway, there's many more texts coming up, but that was a lot of information in a short period of time. So if anybody has any thing to add or chastise me or any input, then please please feel free. Anyone? Anything about Rupa or Sanatana or Jiva Goswami? No? Nothing? So there's just a few more texts without purport, so I'm just going to read through. Text 86. Malira Uchaya Saka Bahuta Badila Badia Paschima Desha Saba Chadila. By the will of the Supreme Gardener, the branches of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami grew many times over, expanding throughout the western countries and covering the entire region. Extending to the borders of the river Sindhu and the Himalayan mountain valleys, these two branches expanded throughout India, including all the places of pilgrimage, such as Vrindavan, Mathura, and Haridwar. Dui sakara prema phale sakala bashila prema phala svade loka unmata haila. The fruits of love of Godhead, which fructified on these two branches, were distributed in abundance. Tasting these fruits, everyone became mad after them. Paschimera loka sabha muda anachara tahan pracharila dhanhe bhakta sadachara. The people in general on the western side of India were neither intelligent nor well behaved, but by the influence of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami, they were trained in devotional service and good behavior. Purport. Although it is not only in Western India that people were contaminated by association with Muslims, it is a fact that the farther west one goes in India, the more he will find the people to be fallen from the Vedic culture. I would say the further west you go in the world. Until 5,000 years ago, when the entire planet was under the control of Maharaj Pariksit, the Vedic culture was current everywhere. Gradually, however, people were influenced by non-Vedic culture and they lost sight of how to behave in connection with devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami very kindly preached the bhakti cult in Western India, and following in their footsteps, the propagators of the Chaitanya cult in the Western countries are spreading the Sankirtan movement and inculcating the principles of Vaishnava behavior, thus purifying and reforming many persons who were previously accustomed to the culture of mlechas and yavanas, like myself. All of those devotees in the Western countries gave up their old habits of illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. Of course, 500 years ago, these practices were unknown in India, at least in Eastern India, but unfortunately, at present, all of India has been victimized by these non-Vedic principles, which are sometimes even supported by the government. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai.